Welcome back to podcast number 2, We Scale Creators.
First one of 2026. It's a new year.
First one of 2026.
It's going to be a big year, too. We got a lot of big things planned, not only for the podcast and content as a whole, but also for the agency and the business as a whole, which we're going to be sharing ideally on a weekly basis throughout this entire year.
Yeah, I think for today we go over what we're doing to hit $500K a month for every single offer in our portfolio right now, and really just go over lessons learned, what's actually working in the trenches on a monthly basis, how we're hitting record-breaking months on our funnels every single month. And yeah, I'll let you kick it off.
We know it's funny too that I think we need to update the viewers on before we get into it is last time we recorded this was right before Christmas, and we're like, oh, we're on track to do like 1.1 in December, and I think we said 7.4,
7.7, yeah, 7.4, 7.47 total.
Yeah, total for 2025. Well, those 2 weeks in between the time that we filmed the podcast and the end of the year were absolutely freaking massive. We ended up crossing 1.4 million, almost hit 1.5 million in revenue for the month of December. And we ended up pushing past 8 million for 2025 as a whole. So that was freaking awesome. Huge way to end the year. And we're going to be sharing with you guys how we're taking that momentum, and like we're going to describe in this podcast here, really what our methodology is when it comes to having not only each one of our offers hit 300,000, 400,000, 500,000, and even more, upwards to $1 million a month just on that offer, but how that plays into our business strategy as a whole. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty much at a point right now where any offer we take on, we have a proven pretty much system to get it to about 300K a month within 90 days, and then typically about 500K a month between month 4, 5, 6. So that's what we want to be sharing with you guys today. And we're going to be revealing a lot of real sauce that I haven't heard anybody else talk about in terms of how to scale primarily Ascension funnels, which is really what we specialize in. I mean, we run all kinds of different funnels, from challenge funnels, VSL funnels, and Ascension funnels, but Ascension funnels are our absolute bread and butter. So I want to kick it off with that and kind of go over why we run Ascension funnels, how they work, and transition into how to actually make them work, how to scale them very, very quickly on cold traffic. Because once you have a proven kind of, Ascension funnel, it's not that difficult. And I think we mentioned this in the last podcast, to go from like 0 to 6 figures in 30 days and get that to multi-6 figures pretty quickly. So as far as Ascension funnel goes, for anybody that doesn't know what they are, essentially low ticket offer, typically $17 price point, $27 price point. You can go upwards of 97, 47, 67. We've tested all kinds of different price points. We found 27 to be the sweet spot across all kinds of different markets. And, you could go $17 and get higher conversion rates, or let's say $47 and get a little bit lower conversion rates. But really, we want to optimize for 2 things. Number 1, max amount of, customer velocity coming in, which is, attributed to conversion rate, as well as ensuring the customers are actually high quality, because at the end of the day, the whole point of an Ascension funnel is to get them to ascend, right, into a high ticket offer.
Yeah, one of the coolest things about the Ascension model, or the Ascension funnel, that I'm sure we'll get into more, is, like you said, we're not just attracting leads, we're attracting paying customers. And really, it's about figuring out and testing, as we've done for, dozens and dozens and dozens of offers in all these different markets at this point, is what price point is going to work best to attract the right type of customer. Because as we're going to get into, the goal isn't just to get front-end customers. The goal is to get quality ones who will consume the content, become familiar with your offer and with whatever value you're trying to display to the market, and then ultimately get a portion of those, as many as possible, to ascend into the high ticket, which I'm sure we'll dive into here shortly.
Yeah, I want to cover this section pretty quick, because I feel like most people watching this are probably familiar with Ascension funnels, so I want to talk about how to actually make them crank. But in short, Ascension funnel, the whole purpose of it is we want to get paid to acquire customers, or at least liquidate, let's say 60 to 90% of our ad spend. We found typically up to about 3K a day in ad spend. They're about 100% liquidation. Once you cross about 3K, this is primarily meta ads, by the way. Once you cross about 3K a day, they start, liquidating at, let's say, 90%, 80%, meaning we spend 10K a day on ads, we're bringing back, $6,000 to $9,000 back. And the cool thing about Ascension funnels too is we're generating customers day one. It's like so many people out there want to run, straight to VSL, which used to work a lot better. But at this point, it's like, there's a sales cycle. It's a multi-week long process. You're spending a lot of money on ads. You're paying $500 for an application for someone that isn't even that familiar with your, maybe offer or brand. Whereas a low ticket, you've already built that trust. You've already built that rapport. They're already paying customers who have taken out their credit card. So not only are you getting, better quality prospects, but you're going to be able to ascend them much easier because now your sales team is able to talk to people that have already taken out their card, right? And one other thing, sorry, Nate, to cut you off, is you're tapping into a bigger total addressable market. A VSL funnel, it's like, 97% of the market can't even afford your service, whereas a low ticket, you're tapping into the entire market.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important thing to call out about why low ticket ascension funnels work so well for us and why they work well in a lot of different markets is you have to look at consumer behavior. And a lot of people now, think back of really any month or any year. I mean, there's always people getting exposed for scamming and being frauds, and the consumers are very hesitant, especially when it comes to spending a lot of money to someone that they maybe know a little bit or they don't even know at all. So the reality is of just how consumers are these days, you're asking for a lot and you're kind of gambling. You're making an uneducated gamble to try to sell a high ticket to an ice cold audience. It's not impossible to do, but it's very low probability to actually succeed at. Whereas with the low ticket model, you make the customer base a lot more apt to buy because the price point is lower. They have less commitment. They don't feel like they're being sold this crazy stuff, at least on the front end, and you're able to open that market up to a lot more people who, even if they knew about your crazy $7, $10, $20, $50,000 thing right away, they're probably not in the position to buy it. And that's because they don't know, like, or trust you at the level that they need to, which when they go through the low ticket, you're able to build a lot of that credibility with the customers because they know your shit actually is good and it works. And they're a lot more likely to not only book a call, but also buy your expensive thing once they get to that point.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, so $27 low ticket, we typically go to about a $97 to $197 upsell depending on the market and the offer, and we'll test out different price points. One thing that we found too, which is pretty interesting, is a lot of people run like split tests and they're like, hey, this is like, it's black or white, like this price point's better. It's very interesting. Like we've tested out different price points with the same market, very similar market, even similar offer, and it'll perform differently across the offers. So it's not like every single split test and price point is going to work for one offer. Even if it's in the same market, you still want to be testing out different, price points for your offers. So $27 front end, $197, upsell. We don't have a ton of upsells in our upsell path. We found going straight to book a call after the initial upsell and then, a little downsell pop up for like a 3-pay plan of the upsell tends to work best because at the end of the day, we're running an Ascension funnel and we want to optimize for book calls, right? So we're able to get the AOV typically between, let's say, $80 to $120 with one upsell, one downsell, as well as the front end. We drive them straight to book a call. So I want to get into the real stuff here in terms of, how to actually scale these. And, for me, everything starts with the market, right? If you're in a bad market and you have a great funnel compared to even if you have a mediocre funnel, but you're not in the, but you're in the best market, you're going to make more money in a great market, right? We prioritize market above everything, above the offer, above the messaging. It's the first thing that we look at. We want a hungry, trending market that has demand. And, your speed of scale is directly correlated with the market you're in. You can scale very, very, very quickly if you're in a hot market that has a lot of energy, has a lot of motion, has a lot of demand, and you're able to tap into that and ideally, solve a problem that market has in a unique way, unique mechanism. It's how we're able to scale very, very quickly because we're very selective of the markets that we actually, take on.
Yeah, which an analogy to give that to is like you could write the best book ever. Like you could be an expert on something, you could write the best freaking book of all time that's ever been written ever. But if it's about a topic that not that many people are interested in, or it's not going to get the amount of eyeballs that you need to actually sell copies of it, then your work isn't that valuable because no one's there to see it and it's not receptive to the people that you ultimately want to buy it. So that's why, like Patrick was saying, we start with the market first, because if we can go into a market, and this is how a lot of people in the industry, who don't really do good work are able to still make a lot of money is because they're going into a market that's hot, that's trending. Think AI, right? We're recording this in beginning of 2026. Everyone's been talking about AI for the last 12 months. There's a lot of people who are, doing AI stuff, and it's not a very good product. It's not a very good offer, but they're still making money because the market itself is trending. It's hot. People want to consume information about it. They want to get better at it. And that leads to a lot of opportunity, especially for people who do great work and have really good offers in said market. It's like the double whammy, if you will. You get a good offer and a good market, and you're on a rocket ship.
Yeah. And it's like, how do you find a good market? Well, if you're in direct response, you're typically probably in the health, wealth, and love space, which is kind of the overarching market, right? And then it's like, well, there's sub-markets inside of those. There's those pockets that have a lot of energy or a lot of motion and a lot of demand. And it's like, okay, so if you're in the health space, what is trending right now? What is hot? And it's like, okay, GLP-1, right? You hear everybody talking about GLP-1. That is a sub-market inside of an absolutely massive market where there's a lot of motion and a lot of energy. And if you could tap into that and, solve the problem in a unique way compared to everybody else, you can scale very, very quickly. Let's say, in the wealth space, it's like, okay, well, there's crypto. I've seen crypto offers go from $0 to $10 million in 1 year when the market's hot, because the market is hot, right? So you want to tap into the energy and all the motion that's happening there. Same with what you just said, Nate. It's like AI. AI is the mothership right now. If you can tap in AI into the wealth space and have it, assist in whatever offer you're selling, you're tapping into a lot of energy and a lot of motion, and you're tapping into a hungry market with a lot of demand, a lot of eyeballs, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really what we look for. We look at market first. We go into these markets, solve the problem in a unique way, and that's how we get started, essentially.
Yeah, and especially with, like you were saying, health, wealth, love, like the three biggest markets in the world, solving it in a unique way is important, because even just take GLP-1, take the example you were, saying there. It's like, from the consumer's perspective, if everything looks exactly the same and it's just, lose weight, whatever, and there's no differentiation within that market, it's very hard for the customers just going to ultimately get served something, and maybe they're like, all right, now I want to do it, click, and they just kind of buy out of remorse. Whereas if you solve it in a unique way, even if you're still solving the same problem, but the mechanism itself is unique to the main market or to the sub market, you're going to get a lot more attention. Your ads are going to be a lot cheaper because it'll invoke curiosity, and on top of something that's already trending and hot. And that's really the recipe for massive scale quickly, is when you combine those two things together.
Differentiation is literally everything in marketing. You're going to differentiate or you're going to die. There's literally no other way about it. Especially now, it's like every market, your prospects have seen 10,000 ads. If you're not different, when we start a campaign, it's like, what can we do to make this radically different, right? You want to create kind of that differentiation and be able to stand out, right? Like the brain, the mind is wired to ignore the familiar, right? So you need to ensure your ads, your overall angle, your messaging has that differentiation. And, that's how you cut through the noise, right? And it's like, also, when we go into a market, and this is more a little bit of the boring stuff, but it's really, really important. It's very, very important to be clear on your economics, right? You want to map out your metrics. So before we start out any campaign, we get into the market, we look at what the total addressable market size is, and we map out all of the metrics for our funnel. So the way we do it is we map out a worst case, best case, average case kind of scenario, and we know, like, hey, these are the KPIs that we're going to hit. We're going to launch ads. The CPC is going to be, let's say, $3 in this market, or let's say $5 in this market. Here's what the conversion rate needs to be for us to actually be profitable. Here's what the Ascension rate needs to be for us to be profitable. And this is really easy to do. You can use tools. There's like Garu. You can vibe code your own, funnel simulator tool very, very easily. And ultimately, you're really just looking for, what are your conversion rates on every single step of the funnel? What is your CPA going to be? What is your AOV going to be? What's the CPC? Those are really the most important metrics, right? It's like AOV, CPA, CPC, and conversion rate. Those are the key four, I would say, that we look at primarily. And only once we're very, very clear on the metrics and we're confident, like, hey, these numbers make sense, we know the KPIs we need to hit on the worst case, average case, and best case, then we go on to actually build out the funnel and and do all the rest of the fun stuff.
And if you notice, Patrick didn't mention ROAS, and I actually just made a post about this recently. Is ROAS is a lagging indicator. You can't really control ROAS. You don't really have much control over that. What you do have control over, though, is like we described, differentiation, which leads to curiosity, which leads to lower CPCs. You have control over split tests that you do on the funnel, which leads to either an increase or a decrease of conversion rates, which has an impact on AOV if you're doing, split tests on upsell pages or how many upsells you have. And all of those leading indicators that are directly controllable is what ends up being tangible with ROAS. So although ROAS is obviously the king and it's the sexy number, we try to focus on the first economic that we have control over, which then leads across the entire funnel and the entire strategy into the ultimate goal, which is total ROAS. It's not just front end ROAS for low tickets. It's the total ROAS when you factor in the upsell people and the people who buy the high ticket. So that's an important distinction. I just made a post about this, but ROAS is not a metric you should be necessarily obsessing over. And if your ROAS isn't where you want it to be, there's likely a reason in the economics that Patrick was just explaining that will lead to either an increase or a decrease in your ROAS across your funnel.
Yeah, let's talk about ROAS in general and what we're seeing, just so, like, based on all of our offers right now. I would say as far as low ticket goes, like I mentioned earlier, you want to ideally self-liquidate, right? Or get as close to self-liquidation as possible. Now, it is possible to get upwards of 3x ROAS. We have an offer right now with a 3x ROAS doing about $500,000 a month every single month, and no high ticket backend. However, it really that's a rare kind of edge case, and it comes down to having a very, very credible, face with a big audience, a well-known brand, and as well as like more of a unique market. I don't want to get into too much, but more of a unique market and a massive market, but more of a unique market that a lot of, direct response marketers don't actually target. So you need kind of a unique market, and you need a very, very big, well-known face with a big audience. Otherwise, we typically see, I would say, about a 2 to 3x ROAS when first launching low ticket funnels. Like the first month, typically it's relatively high. Once you get about 3K, once month one passes, you start seeing it lower. That's just what we've seen across every offer. At that point, you're about 100% liquidation up to about 3K spend. And then that's when you start liquidating, let's say 60 to 90%, which is pretty much our standard. Once you start crossing about 5K a day in spend, you start seeing closer to 60 to 72%, 73% liquidation on the front end, right? And then within typically about an 8-day sell cycle, we get that up to 4 to 6x return on ad spend with a higher ticket back end, which is mostly critical for making these offers scale very, very quickly, unless you're, like I just explained a second ago, you have a really, really big face and kind of a less saturated, I guess, market. I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but that's typically what we see.
Yeah, and especially, to touch on that example of, a unique market, which is a huge market, but it's not something a lot of people are tapping into. Not only do we have massive differentiation in there, but in terms of the KPIs and statistics like we were looking at, we can have the ROAS be that high because our ability to differentiate in that market and also the scale in which we're able to get to in that market means our CPCs and CPAs are so low. Like, again, without giving away too much, in that offer, we have CPCs, I believe, below 50 cents on ads, and our CPA is cheaper than the front end price point on the low ticket. So
that's with a year and a half of running this offer too, and we're still hitting record-breaking months.
Yeah, which is insane. But to tie it back into what we were talking about with the market, it's like that's not health, wealth, or love necessarily, but it's a market where we saw a massive opportunity. There wasn't a lot of competition. We had a great face that we could put in front of that with a nice sized brand, and we were able to create massive results and still create massive results, a year and a half later in that same space, because we focused on all the stuff that we've been talking about, like the metrics and stuff. Some people don't find that sexy. Markets, it's like, okay, whatever, but these are the most important things prior to actually building out the funnel and just throwing money into ads that you have to be aware of, or you're setting yourself up for failure, and you're setting the brand up for failure too in the offer that you're working with. So these are why we obsess over these things so much, is because they matter, and they matter a lot.
Yeah, and I want to get into the real tactical stuff on how we're getting that 4 to 6x ROAS and how we're actually ascending. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit more about actually how to make the front end work, because if you can't make the front end work, you're not going to make the back end work, right? And one of the biggest mistakes that I see, and so many marketers do this, and it's ridiculous how often I see this, is not focusing on one problem and one kind of key outcome, right? Like a lot of people launch offers to appeal to a really, really wide demographic. You're going to have much lower conversion rates doing that. You're going to have much higher CPCs. If you want to really, really scale very quickly, it's very, very important to choose one problem with one core outcome to primarily focus on, right? And then that way, now all of your ads are very, very hyper targeted. Facebook's algorithm or YouTube's algorithm are going to, specifically find the people that have this one problem, and the conversion rate's going to be much higher because now you have congruency between your ad and your landing page.
Yep, 100%. I don't have much else to add on that.
Yeah.
You said it well. It's like the most important thing. I just had a call the other day where I was discussing this with someone we were considering working with, where it sounds great on paper to be able to try to solve a million problems for a million different avatars. But when you actually put that into practice, and some of you might have found this out the hard way, is it doesn't actually work. People need to be able to resonate with something. You need to be able to speak to their emotions of their feeling, what they're feeling in the moment, and how you can present them with the solution. It's like sales. It's like sales on paper. If you're trying to solve their marriage and their financial state and their mindset and all this stuff, it's like they get overwhelmed, they get confused, and that's not what allows people to make educated buying decisions. It actually makes people click away from your ads and your funnel. So that's another important aspect of doing this, is really dialing into what problem are we solving? What is the solution? Is it different? And then there's a million different ways to skin the cat, so to speak, and test that once you actually go live with the funnel.
Yep. So you got the market, you understand the audience, which is also very, very important, understanding the audience. And that's what I mean by solving that one problem for one core demographic: market, audience, then it comes down to offer, right? And you want to have as close to an irresistible offer as you possibly can, right? And how do you do that? Well, it's like Hermosi actually probably said it best. The way I would word it is guaranteed outcome, right? If you have a core outcome that's guaranteed that they can get instantly with zero sacrifice required. Now, of course, that doesn't exist. There's no such thing as that. But the principle is, if you can get it as close to that as possible, you want to sell their core outcome. You want to try to give it the best guarantee that you can give it, and you want to try to remove whatever limitations they have to achieving it. The closer you can get to that, the higher your conversion rate's actually going to be, right? So that's typically how we focus on structuring the offer. However, for the low ticket, it's just that one core outcome, and then we'll include typically like 8 to 9 bonuses in terms of, every limitation they have, or as close to as many limitations they have, and structure those bonuses around those limitations. So now they have kind of a full product suite, right?
Yep, and depending on what market you're in, it's like most of the time that initial first problem is information based, especially if you're going at scale to a very wide, broad, colder audience. It's like most people, and this isn't the case all the time, but speaking in generalities, a lot of the times it is the case that you might be trying to push something, especially when you're scaling to multiple 6 figures a month in ad spend. People aren't even necessarily aware of the solution, or they might not even be aware, at least to a very strong degree, of what the problem is. So on the front end, like Patrick said, being able to focus in and give them the information and the knowledge and some initial tools to help, if not fully solve, partially solve that first problem. And then as they continue into the upsell, into the downsell, into the bonuses, into the high ticket, it's one of two things are going to happen. You're either going to able to solve problems that come after the first one. So like, easy example is like you lose weight and then you got to keep the weight off from coming back. So that's like the next problem that would come up, is now they lost the weight, they want to stay in shape. So that's like a vertical or a horizontal movement. Or you can continue to solve that same problem at a deeper level. So now maybe, I don't know, just think of another example. Maybe they now know how to go talk to women or talk to guys or whatever it is. They now know how to do like approach, but now you need to teach them on how to keep the conversation going or actually go on a date. Like, right, it might not be the best example, but those are the two different things that you really want to focus on when you're going into these markets, is what is the main core problem, and then what comes next, what comes after that. Is it a different version of the same problem or a deeper version of the same problem? Or is there another roadblock that customer is going to hit, which boom, you can present them another offer to help with that.
Yeah. And that's also how you create a deeper backend, right? Which is very, very important. Like the deeper backend you have, the higher maximum kind of allowable CPA you have, meaning you can spend more to acquire a customer, right? And everybody knows the famous saying, whoever can spend more to acquire a customer is going to win, right? And it's very true. If I can spend $300 to acquire a $27 customer, I'm going to smoke every single person in the market. And the only way to do that is by having a deep backend. You got to have a product suite. You got to have, and just like Nate just explained, it's like, well, how do you solve the next problem that comes after the current problem that you're solving? And how do you just continue kind of going down that path, offering maybe more hand-holding support or more, one-on-one individual consulting, or however you want to structure it, whether it's a mastermind, group coaching, whatever it is. How can you create the deepest backend possible so that your CPA, your maximum allowable CPA, is the highest possible? And that's, that's how you go on and dominate everybody in your market and scale very, very quickly.
Yep. And the deeper, and like Patrick said, the deeper the back end, the better. Because especially when you can create, here we go back to the same word again, differentiation. If you have, just one front end, one upsell, one high ticket, you can still scale that and you can scale that to the moon. But really where you have an ideal scenario is where you have multiple different, not only, I guess, front end, back ends, right? You have multiple problems you can solve on the back end, but you can also have multiple tiers of that. So maybe for $7,000, someone can get access to coaching. Maybe for $15,000, they can get access to one-on-one coaching. And maybe for $30,000, they get access to in-person one-on-one coaching, right? Like creating that value ladder and having it go as deep as possible by giving as much value as possible to the consumer is how you really start to dial in those economics over the first 90 to 180 days with the offer. And then once hey, our customers are worth $400 to us over a 6-month time frame, we can afford to have that CPA continue to creep up and still be able to scale very, very profitably, especially as you continue to spend multiple 6 figures a month in the market. You got to have those numbers, you got to know them, and you got to have them locked in so you're able to continue scaling profitably.
Yeah. And it's not even like you need to have, the deepest backend possible to launch, right? Like typically the partners we work with have one high ticket offer or we'll help them build it out with a low ticket offer, mid ticket upsell. And that's all we get started with, right? And that's enough for us to get to that $300,000 a month mark within the first 3 months. But the way we do it is we do quarterly planning, right? For every single partner that we work with. So it's like, here's what we're starting with. And then here's the next quarter fully planned out and what we intend on doing. And one of the biggest levers outside of creating deeper backends is having additional funnel launches later on, right? So it's like low ticket to high ticket Ascension model. We'll run that for 3 months. We'll gain market awareness. The market will see all of our ads. We'll start building our list. We'll start getting buyers in. And then at that point, what's typically standard for us is rolling out a challenge funnel, right? And challenge funnels tend to work really, really well because again, we've already built that market awareness from running ads for the last 3 months, spending, multi 6 figures inside of the market that we're in. Now we launch a free challenge. So it's like a lead magnet play for the entire market as well as existing customers that we've acquired that have not ascended into the high ticket. And, these challenge funnels, we can pretty easily, like at a low level, do a $300,000 launch within, let's say, 3 to 7 days and upwards of close to $2 million. Like we've had 3 challenge funnels at this point that have done, 1.1, we've had 2 that have done $1.6 million in 3 to 10 days. And that's because we kind of time it, right? We do the low ticket Ascension model first, gain that mass market awareness, and then go into that challenge funnel. Do you want to talk about anything else about the quarterly planning itself? Because I feel like that's really, really key. A lot of agencies don't do it. And in addition to making a lot more money, it is a great thing to do for the partners that we work with to kind of see that long-term plan that we have in terms of scaling their offers.
100%. I mean, for us, it's like being on the cutting edge of what's going to work for our partners in their market is unbelievably important to us. Like we want to see further than they can into what's the next thing that's upcoming, what's a logical next funnel structure that can work, and it helps create, especially long term. Like some of our partners have been with us for multiple years at this point, and they know that we're always on top of the game. We're always thinking ahead in terms of okay, this is working great, but what can we do next? What can we do better? And being able to lay that out for them in advance, especially when it requires some additional level of work on their end, right? Like if we do a challenge funnel, they either have to record all the challenge content or get on camera live and then pitch the content over the course of 3 to 7 days. They got a plan for that. You know, a lot of these people have businesses on the back end. They have teams, they have families, they have whatever. So we don't want to just be like, yo, partner, we just thought of a crazy idea. We got to do this challenge funnel. We're doing it on Friday. They're going to be like, what? These guys are like all over the place. So it helps us in the relationship with the partners. It helps us internally be able to capacity plan a lot and think very far ahead, up to 90 days ahead of what are we doing? What's the order of priority? What things need to get done before we go launch a new offer, go launch a new funnel, whatever it might be. So it just gives clarity across the board. And the last thing that I want to say on quarterly planning is with these different funnel types, it creates we talked about differentiation earlier, people buying different ways. So a low ticket might be extremely profitable, but some people might not have booked a call. You know, in fact, depends on the offer you're running, but 50 to 85% of people might not have booked calls from the low ticket because that's not their behavior. So when you're able to reserve them with a challenge funnel or a webinar or a quiz funnel or insert funnel type here, that's going to potentially resonate with either the same customers in a different way, or you're able to tap into new customers who don't want to buy the $27 thing because that's not their behavior. And that's pretty hard to quantify. But when you've done as many of these as we have at this point, we know the data, and we know that when we roll out these consistent either new offers with new launches and new funnels, or just a new funnel to the same offer, we're continuing to go deeper and deeper into that market by getting people to be aware of what we're doing and what our offer is, who we would have never been able to reach otherwise. And I think a lot of agencies especially are leaving so much money on the table, and therefore their partners are leaving so much money on the table by not recognizing that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very small detail, but it builds so much trust with your clients and gives them, you know, like no other agency does it, right? If you have a whole quarterly plan, not just funnels either, like actual seasonality and trends and like, okay, well, we have Valentine's Day coming up. We have Christmas, Thanksgiving, whatever. And you have all of that in your quarterly plan. They're going to see it. It's also going to help your team out, you know, your internal team for your agency to prep and plan ahead for seasonality-based marketing, which is some of the biggest, you know, revenue generating times of the entire year. So you want to ensure not only the client is able to see that you're doing this, but your team is also able to prepare ahead of time because we know this quarter, hey, we're hitting this, we're hitting this, we're hitting this. And of course, you got to be good and you got to hit every single one of them, right? If you send your partner a quarterly plan and you're not doing everything that's in there, you're going to start losing trust. So you got to be great. You have to have a great product to all of your partners that you work with. So with that being said, in terms of actual acquisition, how do we ascend buyers from a low ticket to a high ticket buyer? And I see so many people talking about this and having all these weird methods. It really comes down to a few things, right? There's like a few things that are the 80-20 of it, and we'll just share them and go from there. But really what works best for us is thank you page. After they buy the low ticket, there's a VSL. There's an application underneath the VSL. That gets us a good portion, probably 15% of buyers. And just to give you guys context, it's like on average, we're seeing about 50% of low ticket buyers ascend to a high ticket call, right? And there's some caveats that I'll touch into because they're very, very important to actually making this work. But thank you page, straight to VSL. Secondly, AI SDR. Do you want to touch on that? I know you manage majority of the AI SDR stuff.
Yeah, the AI SDR, and this is something we've been running for a year plus at this point across all of our offers, is unbelievably massive to us. And it's unbelievably massive in the sense of, in really two ways. Number one is we could still have a human set around there who's, calling and emailing and doing all that stuff, but they might work 5 days a week and they got to sleep for 8 hours. And especially when you're selling your offer in different time zones and different countries, like people are awake and people want to communicate at different times. And with AI, you're obviously able to communicate 24/7, 365. And if you train the model like you would a human, you're able to get in touch and have a lot faster speed to lead than you would with a human, or supplementary to a human. Like maybe you have a human go in and call all the people on the list 7 to 14 days after they buy and try to set appointments. But what about the people who don't answer? What about the people who don't have a phone number on file? Like, what are you going to do then? And that's where the AI SDR comes into play and really starts to play cleanup on a lot of those leads. And that's just free money at the end of the day. Because if you know what your, DPL is, your dollar per lead, and you're booking an extra, it doesn't have to be a lot. Maybe it's 5 appointments a week, 10 a week, 30 a week, whatever the number is. That's all just free money that if you didn't have someone, or an AI in this case, be going and constantly hitting them and keeping tabs on them and communicating with them as a human setter would, and building additional trust and answering more questions, that's just money that you would have never made otherwise. So it's absolutely huge. And obviously AI is much more cost efficient from a business owner standpoint to set up than having 15 SDRs on one offer who are just trying to set appointments all day. So helps increase profit margin. And overall, you're just tapping into more customers, figuring out their additional pain points, seeing if they're a good fit, qualifying them and booking them. That without it, it's still possible you could get them, but overall, you're still going to be leaving some level of money on the table, especially on a long enough time horizon. And this is something we do for every one of our partners.
And fine tune them too.
It works across the board.
Yeah, and it's key to fine tune them. Like, we're not just running a straight up AI SMS bot. It's like we train the AI SDR on all of the content that our partner has, whether it's YouTube, whether it's their course material, so that we can actually get their tonality right, we can get their offer right, we can get all the language and messaging right, and everything we do is fine-tuned. It sounds very, very human. People can't even tell the difference. And essentially, we have a whole follow-up flow as soon as they buy the low ticket. We're not just pitching them straight to book a call. We're asking questions. We're diving deeper into their pain points. We're kind of conversating with them, because you have to take them through a sales process still, right? It's not like you're just texting them and say, hey, book a call. It's like, no, there's still a sales process that needs to take place before we actually get them to book a call. But outside of the AI SDR, one of the biggest needle movers for increasing book call percentage that I haven't seen anybody else do is having a pop-up in the membership portal. So as soon as low ticket buyers sign up to their membership portal that have not booked a call, there's a little pop-up, wait before you get started. Our most successful members are booking this call before they get started. Have some clarity on the high ticket offer, calendar, and you get them to book a call right there and then. Now, what's really, really key here, and it's key across the board, is what's going to happen is you're going to get a lot of low ticket buyers that are booking these calls that have not consumed the content. And what's going to happen now is they may as well just be a lead, right? You haven't built that trust with them. You haven't built that rapport with them. You haven't spent enough time with them. So what we do is we have all of our sales teams and setters text them before their call and encourage them and kind of push them to actually watch the content before they get on the call. And if they don't watch the content, we reschedule the call with them. So what you're going to see if anybody, tests this out, is you're going to get pretty low quality leads if you're just talking to them straight after they book a call. However, if you get them to actually consume, if they don't consume, they're not going to convert. If you get them to actually consume when they get on the call, they're going to be some of the warmest and hottest leads that your sales team can possibly talk to, because now they've already consumed all that content. You have that time spent with them. It all comes down to time spent.
And that's another reason that this model is cracked, like I was explaining earlier, above all else, is when you have something for them to, and it's not just like some, hey, look, check out this PDF before you get on a call. Like, it's actually valuable content that's relevant to the situation that they're in, and they're able to consume that prior to the call. Like Patrick said, the show rate goes up, the call quality goes up, the close rate goes up. And eventually, as you're running these offers for a long enough time, you kind of find the sweet spot in there. You figure out, like, okay, how many people, can we book on the front end as soon as possible, who are going to be the kind of people who go through the content on their own? What percentage of the people actually need to be reminded to go through it via emails, via SMS, via phone calls? And eventually you start to figure out and track with, UTMs or other methods to figure out, we're booking X percentage of calls via the thank you page, and here's the typical dollar per lead on those leads. And here's how it looks for the SDR and the course portal and emails and all these other things. You're able to start tracking that, and it looks different, like everything we've been talking about, from market to market. Sometimes people book with the SDR at a much higher rate and the quality is much higher. And sometimes, it takes a couple emails to get them warmed up as they're consuming the course content, and then they book, and then those are worth more over time. So the more methods you can deploy across your funnel, the better you're going to do. And we like to leave no stone unturned here, especially for the partners that we work with. And all these things, everything that we described, has been a massive, massive needle mover for us and our partners.
Yeah, I'd say big five are the thank you page VSL, the AI SDR, membership portal pop-up, and then outside of that, it's just general emails. And as well as like in the membership portal, there's all the content, there's whatever they're getting. There's just, applications underneath each video for them to book a call, et cetera, et cetera. One thing I do want to touch on is the emails as well. The way we do it and what we found works best is typically we have like a 2-week long Ascension sequence after they actually buy the low ticket. And then after that, we just send daily campaign emails, right? And the reason we do that is like, if you have a 6-month long Ascension sequence, you're not able to actually send topical emails. Whereas like if you have it, for 10 to 14 days, and then after that, you do daily campaign emails. Now you're not just pitching because, if you're constantly pitching to your list, you're going to burn it out. You're harming the actual relationship with all of your buyers if you're pitching in every single email. So you want to have that initial Ascension sequence, and then you want to go to kind of nurture that list, provide value to it. And with campaign emails, you're also able to tap into what's happening right now in the market, what's happening right now in the world. How can we get topical with our emails? How can we get seasonal with our emails? Provide value, nurture that list, et cetera, and then get them to ascend over time.
Yeah, and same exact or very similar strategy with our ads as we do our emails, in the sense of we want to hit trends, we want to hit pain points, we want to hit things that are going on in the world, whether it be a holiday, whether it be an event, and all tying it obviously back to the offer. But it's very similar as if you had a newsletter, right? I'm sure everyone who's listening to this, including us, are subscribed to some newsletter or on some freaking email list. And if every single day it was just pitch, it's like eventually you're like, dude, I can't do this anymore. I'm unsubscribing, or I'm just deleting this email or blocking it. That doesn't serve anyone. So there's a very healthy balance between providing value, continue to keeping, open rates high and click-through rates high, while also at some points you do a little bit more of a direct pitch. And what we've found is if you build a lot of value, you build a lot of trust, and then you pitch, and you pitch with elements like scarcity or discounts or something like that, then you see the click-through rate and the book calls absolutely skyrocket. And that's the method that works, instead of just spamming the list every day to book a call. That's like short-term gratification and not really thinking long-term. And maybe you'll get some call increases the first couple of times you do it, but we can tell you it's not going to work long-term.
Yeah. I mean, as a general principle, it's like whoever provides the most value to the market and business is going to win, right? And you want to make sure you're providing value to your buyers on an ongoing basis, nurturing them, and et cetera, et cetera. I do want to cap this around 45 minutes, but I think there's one other really important thing that we need to talk about as far as actually scaling, right? So there's Ascension, there's the market, there's the offer, there's everything else that we talked about, but then it's like, how do you scale even bigger, right? And to me, it's really understanding, and I didn't understand this for probably like a decade of marketing, and I've always heard about it. I've always read about it. Everyone's talked about it. I never really fully understood it. And that is the concept of, meeting the market where it's at by levels of awareness, right? So your market has different levels of awareness. There's the unaware crowd. There's the most aware crowd. The most aware crowd already knows who you are. There's the product aware crowd that maybe, aware that there's products that can solve their problem, and they may know your competitors, but they don't know you, or maybe they do know you. They're solution aware. Maybe you're in the, financial space, and they're already familiar with, let's say, trading or crypto or whatever. And at that point, it's like, well, what makes you different, and how can you actually stand out to a solution aware audience? Then there's like problem aware. They know they have a problem, but they don't know the solution, right? They know that they don't want to feel like, lethargic, right? Or something like that. They know they have a problem, but they don't know what solutions exist. So when you're, first launching a funnel, it's like you can devote a lot of spend, especially if you have a credible face, to a more product aware and most aware audience. And you're going to get a lot of sales from that because the market may already know that face, right? Whereas if you're tapping into a newer offer, you want to start with something like solution aware or problem aware, right? And then once we get to that point where we're spending $150K to $200K plus a month on ads, we start kind of going down to the level of awareness. So you want to start at the top, most aware, product aware, solution aware, right? You can get that funnel very, very easily if you have a good offer and a good market to, let's say, 300 to 400 grand a month by tapping into those levels of awareness. Now, if you want to scale past that, you need to start going to a more unaware market or a problem aware market that isn't even familiar or aware of the solution. And how do you do that? Well, it's like an unaware market. You want to kind of lead with a big idea. What's the big angle? What's the big idea that is different that's going to capture that awareness? Now, typically you're going to see a higher CPA in an unaware market, right? Because they're not familiar. You kind of have to walk them through and educate them throughout the entire kind of sales process from scratch. But at a certain point, you're going to need to do that if you want to unlock $500K to $1 million plus a month. And it's very, very important to, if you're speaking to an unaware audience in your ad and your landing page is speaking to a most aware audience, your congruency from ad to landing page is completely mismatched, and you're going to really, really suffer and harm your conversion rate. So it's very critical to match your ads to the same level of awareness that's on your sales page and your marketing. And we can talk about this all day. It's a whole kind of big thing, but it's very, very important to kind of study this and understand it deeply if you want to unlock $500K to $1 million plus a month and so on.
Yeah, it's well said, and as I think you briefly touched on, like, this awareness level is always changing, and not only does it change by market, it changes by market over time. Where right off the bat, you might have a very strong percentage of that being most aware or product aware, but eventually as you continue scaling, and this goes down to like your backend team with your video people and your creative people, your graphic design people, your copywriters, whatever, they need to start being aware of how different awareness level ads start to perform as you scale much further, because it will shift, it will change, and it's important for you as the agency owner or the person who's running the offer that you're ahead of that and you're not being reactive to, oh, I just launched these new ads and 6 months into the campaign, they're all most aware and they're all bombing. Like, why? You got to start to see that, because your customers and the algorithm will tell you the trends of this. And if you're able to stay on top of that on a weekly basis and inform that to your creative team on what the next set of ads you're going to roll out is and how the awareness level and the language should differentiate based on what the data is showing, that's where no matter what kind of ads you're launching or how the market is receptive to it and what awareness level you're tapping into, you're always maximizing conversions. You're maximizing conversions because no matter who sees your ad, and when your pixel's fully trained up and Facebook might know, hey, I'm going to start, I don't got a lot of people who are hot anymore. I'm going to start showing this colder. You're not showing them a product that they have no idea exists from a face who they have no idea who they are. Like, that's not an ad that's going to perform very well. So only other thing to add to that is make sure you know the data, make sure you know the numbers, because this stuff is always changing, and it's your job or whoever's running your offer's job to know what that is and be on top of it.
Yeah, and ensure they're allocating the right budget percentage to the right level of awareness. And we've made that mistake too, where we've devoted 30 to 50% of our ad spend to a most aware or product aware level of awareness. And we're like, why is this offer bombing? Well, we're devoting way too much ad spend to a higher level of awareness when we need to kind of tone it back and maybe devote 10% to a most aware audience in terms of the ads that we're running. And then let's say 30 or 40% to a solution aware, kind of audience. So we'll touch more on that later on, but I think that pretty much covers the core principles on how we're scaling offers to $500K a month. And again, these podcasts that we do are really just lessons that are working for us. And we're in the trenches scaling offers every single day, running new split tests every single day. Some things that we say here may not be fully applicable a year from now, but they're working right now. They're working in the trenches, and we're going to continue documenting what's working for us in these weekly podcast episodes.
Yep, and like you said, I assume that at some point later this year in 2026, we'll probably come out with a revamped version of this because of how much.
But you guys said this works, and it's like, well, market's strange.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that we've said too, right? That works in one market and doesn't work in another, and ultimately it's your job, depending on what market you're in or what market your clients are in, is to honestly just test as much as you can and figure it out. I mean, that's how we figured it out, and now we know pretty much for certain right away when we take on a new partner, because we've done this so many times, we have so much data, like we got to deploy this, and we know roughly that this angle is going to work more. And all that comes from a lot of data and a lot of testing. And if anyone's thinking about doing it and how to implement this, it's the theme that I think is just test it. And ultimately the data is going to tell you what the truth is. But as a whole, low ticket ascension models, one of the most profitable things you could be running in 2026, and we will continue to roll out for as many partners as we can. And as we've been doing, continue to crush 300, 500, $750 million months with this exact funnel structure.
Yep. Well said. I think that pretty much covers everything. If you want us to run your ads, run your offer, partner with you, and scale you to 500K plus a month, go to WeScaleCreators.com, apply, and we'll see if you're a good fit to work with us. And yeah, we'll see you on the next week's episode.